I want to talk about political sea changes because what's interesting to me, I'm just a human being, right? I just like to play music. I don't really consider myself super left wing, super right wing. I mean, I think growing up I was more of a lefty. But I think that what's happened is, okay, the left wing people of the 90s were very like question authority. We were into kind of like conspiracy stuff. We were into investigative journalism and, you know, stuff like that, right? And now it's sort of like the people think of you as right wing when you're sort of like the question authority, like, you know. So, I think what's kind of happened, I'm kind of making this to kind of like describe my journey because I think a lot of people might like, oh, what's his, story. So basically, like growing up, like I was like against war. I was against like all the racial shit. Like I went to the when Rodney King got beat up. I went to the protest for him. Um, I went to the protest for against Iraq war. You know, because I have a father who is a Vietnam veteran, right? And so it's like we were against war. Because we know that that a lot of wars are based on falsehoods, right? And that a lot of the poor people end up fighting the wars, and the people who start the wars are the people instigating the wars are the people who can afford to not have their people part of the wars, right? So we're anti-war, pretty much like women's rights, gay rights, all that. um so I think something shifted. Okay, one time I was hanging out with these kind of radicals in Seattle, and they were making all these kind of abortion jokes. And I would say I was probably, I think I was pro-choice, but I just I felt like I felt like a lot of the jokes they were making wasn't funny to me. They were joking about abortion and stuff like that. And I started realizing that maybe I wasn't like an extreme leftist like some of the people I was hanging out with. Maybe I didn't actually agree along those lines. And I started kind of thinking about it. And and I was like, what am I politically? And then I remember being in Hawaii and like the elections in the 2000 elections with George Bush and Al Gore, and it seeming kind of fake, like it seemed like Al Gore was winning, and then I was like questioning the elections, if the elections are even count, you know. And so then, I'm like, you know, I'm working at the Sonoma County Airport the year 2000, and I'm hearing about Bohemian Grove. People are flying through for Bohemian Grove, diplomats and Secret Service agents and all this, and I'm hearing about it. And then Alex Jones comes out with a movie about Bohemian Grove. So, you know, a lot of people say Alex Jones is crazy, this and that, but I always thought he was kind of interesting because he snuck into the Bohemian Grove. Like, who does that, right? So, anyway, it's just, for me, I think it was just somebody who's skeptical about a lot of things. Like, for instance, when 9/11 happened, there was a big cloud going on, like people trying to figure out what happened, why it happened, who did it, right? And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories around it, right? And I never, there's no way to know exactly, right? So, but he had his theories about it. People had their theories about it, and so I think like I was well on my way to sort of having alternate um, views about things, right? And then like I went to Israel for like a couple weeks one time for a trip. And I came back, and this lady was yelling at me that I shouldn't have gone to Israel, and Israel's evil, and all this shit like that. So, then I was hearing Michael Savage, and he was talking about all these people, that were like against America, like why. And he's like this kind of radical conservative, right? But I was like kind of agreeing with some of the stuff he was saying. So then I'm like, am I conservative? I don't know, but I mean, he's like a former liberal, right? So I'm like, but I don't feel culturally like a conservative person. But I was like agreeing with some of the stuff he was saying about like, people aren't thankful to be here. They shouldn't be here, right? And stuff like that, just stuff that kind of makes sense, right? But then I kind of felt like he was kind of an asshole because when there was bombings going on, he was like, "Oh, ho, ho, ho! Finally, my tax money is going to something good, something like that, right?" So I'm like, he's an asshole. So I don't want to. So I don't want to go that extreme, right? So I'm kind of like, and I don't know. I just kind of was going back and forth with stuff, right? And then I was traveling in Europe. I was 26 years old, and I started getting depressed, and I went to Ireland, and I became kind of more spiritual and more biblical, right? So I think I was so hanging out with certain biblical people, I sort of became more conservative and kind of like stuff like that. But whenever I go one way, I always seem to come out the other end. I never really go to one extreme completely. You know, After that, I came back to Sonoma County. Um, I was living in San Francisco. I was taking screenwriting classes. I was playing music, you know, and all this stuff was informing my writing and my stuff that I was going through. But I never really was either extreme. I never really agreed with either extreme because I felt like it was like there was this force that was making people disagree with themselves. And so that was making them not see the bigger picture, right? Hegelian dialectic is what they call it. Hegelian dialectic. It's where you are fooled into thinking that there's these two teams, right? But it's an illusion. So, so what's happened is we become like New World Order. We become George Orwell. We become people spying on each other, people taking antidepressants, the soma drug to get through the day, or the weed, or whatever have you, right? We become that. So it takes a lot of effort in life to not go that route. Say I'm going to be a natural person. I'm going to get my sleep. I'm not, you know, do things on a natural level, and people think you're crazy. People think you're crazy if you want to live life in a natural way. Everything's upside down. So I'm not liberal or conservative because I think that those are just like when they say, what is it? A social construct. When they say sex or race or whatever is a social construct, I think that saying that you're how you fit into a certain political class is a social construct. So I don't really want part of that. I remember a friend of mine said, "There's left on a checkerboard, right on a checkerboard. What if you just want to throw the whole checkerboard out?" So I guess the closest thing I would be is libertarian because I believe in less government. And I believe that if they're going to spend all our taxes on wars and government corruption, and they're going to take billions of dollars that they should be spending on the homeless and putting it in their own pockets, then we shouldn't have to pay taxes, or at least as many taxes as we pay. It should all be accounted for on a big screen where it shows where the money's going, right? If we have to pay, we should know where the money's going. That's what I believe. Why is there not transparency? If you have to give thousands of dollars of your money, you should be able to know where it's going, you know? So, you know, if I knew where the taxes were going, and it's like, oh, look, 10%'s going for the roads, 10%'s going for healthcare, 10%'s going. I see where everything's going, then I'm like, oh, okay, I feel good about this. This is fine. This is all going for a purpose. But if it's not like that, we shouldn't have to.